In this final video covering the Apocalypse Triptych, I'll be reviewing the 9 standalone stories spread across those 3 anthologies. The Apocalypse Triptych consists of 3 anthologies: The End is Nigh, The End is Now, and The End has Come. John Joseph Adams edited it, and each volume has stories about life before, during, and after the apocalypse. A lot of the authors wrote 3-story arcs, but some of them wrote 2-story arcs, and about 9 of them wrote standalones. So, The End is Nigh contained 4 standalone stories. The first standalone is called System Reset, and it was written by Tobias S. Buckell. Charlie and his buddy Toto are skip tracers that get hired to track down people who are wanted by someone. Charlie just wants a job that's legitimate and isn't interested in really doing the skip tracing thing anymore. But then Toto dangles a big payday in front of him, and he can't resist. Charlie's good with computers, though the tech talk in the story is very light. There's a few scenes with some decent action in this story, and Charlie's observations are detailed enough to be interesting, but not the sole focus of the story. I'm rating this story a 7 out of 10. There's a big reason their adversary is doing what he's doing, which leads to one bit of dialogue about politicians creating a police state. Reading this made me wonder how unaware I was in my 30s and 40s, since it seems like every science fiction writer could see that parts of the world were headed in that direction long before now. The second story I'll cover is called Enjoy the Moment, and it's written by well-known science fiction writer Jack McDevitt. The main character in this one is a 30-year-old astrophysicist named Miriam Gibson. There's apparently a saying that physicists have to have made their big splash before they turn 30, or their brains become less welcoming of new concepts, thus diminishing the chance of a big discovery. Miriam is worried that she'll never make her splash now, but she starts searching for the night skies for something that might change that. When she finds it, other events lead her to being less worried about her name being famous. Miriam starts off ambitious enough to want her name to be known. By contrast, her real estate agent husband is happy just to be known by the people that he's helped or befriended. This one gets a 6 out of 10 from me. The story is interesting as science fiction because it looks at fame, which is a common human desire, and provides a contrast to what life could be if you just change your frame of mind. The next story is called Enlightenment, and it was written by Matthew Mather. The viewpoint character here is a vegetarian named Effie Harrigard, and Effie has an issue with her body image and thinks she's not all that attractive. When she meets Michael, she gets to know him and then gets a deeper look at his particular worldview. I'm not quite sure why this story is in this book. It reads more like a straight-up horror story than an apocalyptic story. The last section does kind of imply that there may be some end-of-the-world stuff coming, but to me, it didn't bring it to a true apocalypse. I'm rating this one a 4 out of 10. It's written well with a good viewpoint character and a sort of interesting premise, but I just didn't think it truly belonged in the book. The final tale I'll cover from The End is Nigh is by Paolo Bacigalupi, and it's titled Shooting the Apocalypse. In this one, the US states have split into independent territories, or at least Texas and Arizona have for sure. Arizona is also split into a couple areas around Phoenix, and the dividing line is a canal that delivers water to the residents on the correct side of the fence. A guy named Timo is a photographer, and he's trying to help his reporter friend Lucy find her next big story. When he finds a Texan with water jugs tied to his corpse, he thinks he might have something. The viewpoint in this one shows the efforts and possibly the thoughts of photographers that are looking for their next big image. I'd rate the story a 6 out of 10. As with many of Bacigalupi's stories, the coming apocalypse is climate related, and this time it's specifically water related. It also covers the tribalism that comes with resource scarcity and portrays the lengths people will go to so their own resources aren't taken by someone from outside their own community. The story was good on its own, and I can see how it relates to Apocalypse, though I wasn't 100% sure it should have been in the book. The next story comes from The End is Now. It's called Automat, and it was written by Daniel H. Wilson. The year is 1725, and Peter the Great has just died. He had some automatons created, and one was intended to replace him and rule forever in his image. However, Peter's wife Catherine sees the automatons as abominations, and now they're on the run and have to fight off the dragoon soldiers that she sent after them. The automaton character's interesting point of view is used to tell the story in current time and in flashbacks. I'd give this one a 6 out of 10 with the caveat that for me, it seems like it would be more in line with like maybe a steampunk or an alternate history anthology. If there is an apocalypse in this one, maybe it's the death of Peter the Great and coming changes in Russia. I'm not sure. I have nearly zero Russian history knowledge, so I can't say one way or the other. Maybe the apocalypse is the more personal apocalypse for the main character and the other automaton with him. Either way, I enjoyed it, even though it didn't seem directly related to the world, or to the end of the world, I mean. The final four standalone tales from the Apocalypse Triptych are all coming from The End Has Come. Bannerless by Carrie Vaughn takes place in a world where climate change led to coastal flooding and a concurrent superflu wiped out a lot of people. It's not explained why, but since society recovered, people are not allowed to have children unless they've been given or earned a banner. Unbannered pregnancies are punishable, and children from such pregnancies usually have to work harder to be accepted by their communities. Enid and her new partner Bert, they travel to a community to investigate a report of an unauthorized pregnancy. I can't say much more about the story without giving away too much of the plot. It was a good story, and the pivotal cause for the pregnant girl's actions didn't turn out to be what I thought it would be. I'm rating this story a 7 out of 10. The main character Enid is fair, and her actions speak to some compassion on her part. Her partner Bert is new to the job, but he fills the role fairly well, though the story probably could have been done without him since he didn't really seem that important to any specific scene. The story didn't go into why the society is run the way it is, but there are two novels called Bannerless and The Wild Dead set in this same world. Some related short stories also set in the world are called Amaryllis, Astrophilia, Bannerless, Where Would You Be Now, and Learning Letters. And those can be found in various places online. I'll link them in the description. The next story is Acts of Creation by Chris Avallone. Agnes is a doctor in a psych ward. However, this isn't an ordinary psych ward. This psych ward houses people that have telepathic powers that unleash destruction if they're able to express themselves through art or poetry. Agnes meets with a patient named Reeves who wants to disappear from the hospital, and she has to deal with that. Agnes is trying to make sure that Reeves is okay while also ensuring that he doesn't somehow accidentally unlock her own buried ability by planting the wrong thing in her mind. Reeves's desire is just to be free, even if it means he'll no longer exist. I'm giving this one a 7 out of 10 because I found the concept of using spoken word or created art as a weapon to be pretty interesting. It would be nearly impossible to stop someone that you didn't know from wreaking havoc if they wanted to do so, if they had a power like that. So hopefully I don't butcher this author's name too bad, but Australian Leaf Shallcross wrote the next story called Wandering Star. An asteroid's going to hit the Earth somewhere in Australia. The story splits time between detailing the patches in a homemade quilt that survived the apocalypse and a mother's viewpoint before the asteroid hits. She's wondering if keeping her kids close and working to survive is better than finding a foster family in some other part of the world and shipping them away. The story pretty much asks the ultimate question of parents. How far are you willing to go? How much pain are you willing to endure to ensure your kids have a chance for survival in desperate times? The asteroid's big enough that it'll affect the entire world, so the kids are in for a rough ride, whether they stay or they go. I'm rating this one a 6 out of 10. It was written well, but it didn't seem like there was any urgency to it. It's possibly because the characters had plenty of warning and had already decided to accept their fate and prepare for their survival efforts. I'm not really sure. The last story in The End Has Come is called The Happiest Place, and it's by Myra Grant. The apocalypse in this story was a superflu that 9 out of 10 people caught, and only 1 out of those 9 survived. The characters in this story worked at Disneyland before the superflu, and they've lived there and taken in others since the world ended. The generators at Disneyland were designed to keep it running when the Los Angeles power grid goes out for a little bit. However, they weren't designed to run for 18 months straight, and now one of them is broken down and needs to be fixed. Amy, the most senior employee in the park, has taken charge of running the place, so everyone kind of looks to her to solve problems, and they even call her the mayor, even though she's not really a big fan of being called that. The story is told from her viewpoint, and a few of the other residents are described. There's a little bit of action and sort of a melancholy ending. I'd rate this story a 6 out of 10. It was good, but nothing mind-blowing. Although it did make me wonder if Disneyland or one of the related parks would be a good place to settle after an apocalypse, since they're almost like little cities with infrastructure for thousands of people. Hopefully, I'll never have to find out. And that's it for the Apocalypse Triptych. I've covered 64 stories over the course of this series, stories about viruses, aliens, asteroids, artificial intelligences, and more. I say the variety of ideas alone makes it worth the read. For the story arcs, I think the strongest were the Religious Cult arc by Robin Wasserman, the Digital Gods arc by Ken Liu, the Silo-related arc by Hugh Howey, the Land of Nod arc by Will McIntosh, and the Deer Camp arc by Scott Sigler, and one other, the Brain Disease arc by David Wellington. I think my favorite individual stories were In the Air by Hugh Howey, The Seventh Day of Deer Camp by Scott Sigler, and Agent Isolated by David Wellington. I'll list the videos that cover those in the description. Leave a comment if you want to share other apocalyptic fiction that you liked or just have something to say about my reviews. Hit the like and subscribe buttons if you want to help me out. They don't cost anything and they do help me out. Anyway, I'm off to figure out what to read next. Bye for now.